Welcome, everybody. I'm Paul Whitcover. I'm the Associate Dean of the Online MFA. I'm joined tonight for our Wireside Chat by my erstwhile co-host, Melissa Hart, an instructor in our program, and our guest, who is another instructor in the program, Anne-Marie Yerks.
Hi.
Who I'm going to introduce. Anne-Marie is a creative writer and Pushcart Prize nominee from Metro Detroit, Michigan, a graduate of George Mason's MFA program. Her short stories have appeared in journals such as Jute, The Penn Review, and several anthologies, including Best Small Fictions 2022. She is the author of Dream Junkies, New Reverse Press 2016, and LUSH, Odyssey Books 2020, and recently finished a literary hybrid called The Origin of Blair Millerstowe, which we will be talking about in just a bit. She has freelanced for many magazines, publishing nonfiction articles about wellness, fashion, real estate, crafts, home improvement, and education. A longtime writing teacher, she loves traveling to literary destinations and occasionally presents at AWP and the Winter Wheat Festival of Writing. Ooh, that sounds like fun. Anne-Marie is also a certified seamstress, but prefers the word sewist, fiber artist, wife, and a beginning gardener. And I have some contact information for her, which I am going to throw into the chat right now. And there we go. That's how you can contact Anne-Marie or learn more about her at her website. So Anne-Marie, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Welcome, everybody. Nice to see you.
We've got quite a crowd here tonight, so I'm really happy about that. So Anne-Marie, tell us a little bit about your writing journey, how you ended up where you are today. And I noticed that you have a mix of like nonfiction kind of journalism type credits as well as your fiction. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you balance those two aspects of your career as well.
Sure. I actually jotted down a little bit about my career path before I signed in. So I started, of course, in college. I went to North Carolina State University. It's the Wolfpack, not the Tar Heels. But they have a very good writing program there. So I was an undergrad English major. And so I took a class with Lee Smith.
Oh, I love Lee Smith.
Yeah.
What a great writer.
Definitely.
Oh,
yes.
How cool.
Yeah.
I'm so envious of you.
Yeah, Lee was my first creative writing teacher. And, she's a well-known, Southern writer. And she wrote the book Fair and Tender Ladies. She's written tons of novels, she's still writing out there writing. Oh, somebody just said hi.
Yep.
Hi, I didn't catch it, bye. So I had a class with Lee, and Lee referred me to the George Mason University Creative Writing Program for my MFA, and she wrote my letter of recommendation and everything. And so I left Raleigh, where I was living, and I moved to Washington, D.C., and I went to my creative writing program at George Mason. And when I was at George Mason, I was the editor-in-chief of one of their literary magazines, which is called So to Speak. And it's still out there. It's a feminist journal of language and art. And you can take a look. They have a really nice website now. When I was the editor, we were still receiving submissions through the mail. So I remember, I had like a little office, and I would do all my homework in the office. And so I remember like going down the hall to the mailbox and pulling out all of our submissions. And I always wanted more submissions, like on any given day, there would only be like 2 or 3. I wanted like 30.
Would they come in envelopes with stamped self-addressed envelopes? Mm-hmm. Boy, those were the days. Do you remember those, Melissa?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they came, people would have, it was all printed out, and you'd have an SASE, and most people didn't want their full manuscript back. You could just send the rejection slip. But I remember one time I rejected something, and the person sent me a really mean letter. Yeah, so that can happen. Yeah. occasionally stuff like that would happen. But so anyway, when I was at So to Speak, I also had to lay out and design the entire magazine. So, I did everything. I mean, I did have other people working, but I did basically everything. I took all the pictures, I laid it all out in PageMaker or whatever we used back then. Might have been Quark Express. But yeah, so I learned a lot about graphic design, and I really learned also a lot about the internet, which was just kind of taking off at that time. So when I graduated from the MFA program, there were all these jobs for, people who knew HTML. Like if you knew HTML, you could get a job. And so I started working at internet startup companies. And I worked at a few of them, and they would go, they went out of business quickly.
Right.
So, but a spinoff from that was one of the internet startup companies that I worked for was writing a book, like a big computer book, one of those books that's like this, this thick. And so I worked on that book, and then I started working on once I did that one, then that company asked me to work on other computer books. So I wound up working on like 4 or 5 computer books. And the way they kind of did it is they would turn you into like a person who knew you, like they would kind of celebritize you, like make it sound like you were a real big expert on this,
Right.
chapters that you wrote. And so that was really fun. So I have I think 4 computer reference books that I worked on for new writers, like Inside Dreamweaver 4 and Flash MX Magic. And so that was really fun. And but I was always kind of like, well, this isn't really what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be a computer book writer. I wanted to be a creative writer. And so I was trying to get other stuff out there. So I had some nonfiction published and magazines and stuff like that. But I wasn't really doing a lot of creative writing at that time. So so eventually I decided to leave DC and move back home to Michigan, where I'm from. That's where I am right now. There's probably people in our audience who live in Michigan, because it's actually a really big state, or who know people who live in Michigan. So I moved back home and I worked at University of Michigan for a while, and I was working as like a graphic designer, like internet person. And that was when I started writing novels. So I wrote a big novel that, had been in my brain for a long time, and it was absolutely awful.
So that was not your first published novel.
It was not my first published novel. It was just, I still have it. Sometimes I read it and it had plot issues.
Right.
I'll just say
Are you ever tempted to go back to it? Fix it up?
I would completely rewrite it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use a word of what I had written before, but the characters were good. That wasn't the problem. The problem was the plot, the storytelling. Yeah. So that, that one didn't work out, but I didn't give up, and I started publishing, short stories, and so forth. And then eventually I worked on another novel, the novel Dream Junkies, which was better and did get published by New Rivers Press, which is the University of Minnesota, I think, or Minnesota State at Moorhead. That's what it is. And so Dream Junkies was published, and I don't have a copy of it because it was a while ago and they sold out all the copies, but it is on Amazon. And so that was, a great achievement for me. And I was back in Michigan at that time. And then I just, kept on writing. And then I published this one, LUSH, and this was in 2020. And this one was really inspired by teaching at Southern New Hampshire.
Really?
Because, yeah, I don't usually write science fiction, not anything, a little bit, but science fiction was never really my first, thing. I'm more of a literary writer. So, but when I started teaching at Southern New Hampshire, I was like so inspired by all of the sci-fi and fantasy I was reading and all the dystopian fiction I was reading. Then I was like, I don't want them. I was like, I want to have fun too. So this is a sci-fi dystopian novel. It could not be described any other way.
Uh-huh.
Maybe also as a feminist novel.
Is it a YA?
Yes, it's a
Uh-huh.
YA novel. Yeah. And this was published by a publisher in Australia called Odyssey Books. And it came out in 2020. And so I've done some stuff with this book. Like I've gone to conferences and stuff and sold copies and did some videos and so forth. And so, and then of course, all along, I've been working on my freelance writing career, just writing, random articles for about any topic that anybody wants me to write about. I've written about everything that you can, imagine. And lots of times I don't get a byline. I mean, I think that's something I should mention to, people who are thinking about freelance writing, nonfiction. I mean, I never expect to get a byline. Sometimes I get one. Some places will do it, other places just want to take it and put someone else's name on it and publish it.
Wow.
So that happened.
So that's happened to you before. You've
Oh,
had your
yeah.
writing published under somebody else, like a house name or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it happens with content writing. Yeah.
What does that feel like?
It doesn't bother me as long as I get paid quickly.
Right. But I mean, that's the thing with this kind of work is that often you don't get paid quickly.
Well, yeah. I mean, I work through an agency, so I do get
Okay.
paid quickly. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's a good point that I should make is that if you're a freelancer, working through an agency is a good idea.
Can you talk a little
Because,
bit more
yeah.
about like what kind of agency? That I haven't really
Yeah.
heard too much about that sort of an arrangement. How does
It
that
happens
work?
more with content writing when you're just writing articles that are on the internet. So there's agencies out there where they have a team of writers and people are like, hey, I need an article for my blog about health food or skincare or the Academy Awards or whatever it is. And so they'll just put in a request and just any writer can pick up the job and write the article. And then it's given to the client. And of course, they have a chance to revise it and stuff or ask for revisions. But you might never even see where the article is published.
Wow.
And it might have somebody else's name on it, but that's not the way that I always write. So,
right.
But
it's interesting to know that that's an option, that's something that exists out there. So in a job like that, you would get paid by the job, I assume. You just get a flat fee.
yeah.
And would you be considered then like a kind of a freelance employee of the agency or
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Super interesting. Do you do any of that, Melissa?
I don't. Honestly, I didn't know that was an option.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Okay,
It's new. It was new to me too. It's really fascinating. Yeah. And then we have a question in the chat. How do you get connected with an agency like this?
You want to research content writing.
Yeah, Melissa just put a link in the chat.
Yeah, content writing agencies. I would give you the name of the agency I work for, but they're not really hiring right now.
Yeah, no, I understand. But I mean, that's the kind of job that you want to get to kind of supplement your work.
Right.
I'm sure they're not paying you a living wage. You couldn't subsist entirely off of that kind of work.
No.
But I mean, you get an idea from them, and then I assume you have to do some research.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
I mean, so that, I mean, let's talk about research a little bit. The necessity of research for writing fiction and for writing nonfiction. I mean, when you're writing nonfiction, it's kind of obvious that you obviously need to research your subject, but like with fiction, oftentimes, especially in science fiction, people might think, well, I don't have to research this because it's all made up. So talk a little bit about, like with LUSH, for example, Did you
Yeah.
do any research for that? And what kind of research did you have to do?
Yeah, I did a lot of research for this for LUSH, because one of the themes of the book is climate change. It has a little bit of a cli-fi angle to
Mhm.
it. So I read a lot about climate change, and since it takes place in a future society, I had to kind of think, what would a future society be like? And so I read about things like that. Um, I also read a little bit about, boarding school, because she goes to, it's not a real boarding school though, but
Uh-oh, plot twist.
yeah, the boarding school has a dark secret.
Uh-oh.
But so things like that. With my other novels, I haven't done a lot of research, I have to admit, because they are more like contemporary
Mhm.
novels. Yeah, so that I can just write about, what I know. But
Right.
for nonfiction, definitely lots of research for just it, and the content articles that I've written, I've done, lots of research. I wrote an article about Turkish rugs, and I didn't know anything about them, so I had to do some research for that. And it was a fascinating subject. So I learned a lot about uh, Turkish rugs and the patterns and designs that they use, and the symbolism behind the designs.
Very cool. So we have another question in the chat that says, I'm curious as to what your research process looks like when you're writing. Where do you typically start?
Well, where everybody does, Google. You just open up a new tab and type in your search, but I have some little places that I like to go. One is the Southern New Hampshire Library.
What
Yeah,
a
I mean,
great
we have
resource
access
that
to
is.
a university library with all the databases, right at our fingertips, to use that cliche. So I use the Southern New Hampshire Library, and I also like the site, it's called archive.org. So you might take a note of that, because they have it's like a free books they have there. But the books are like older ones, yeah, archive.org, and you can check out a book for an hour. So
Oh,
going
wow.
back to Turkish rugs, I think I actually did go to archive.org and looked up Turkish rugs, and there were some books that I could just borrow. And the neat thing about archive.org is that they scanned the entire book. So you open it up and it looks like a real book inside. And it's funny because sometimes you'll see like little inscriptions inside
Hmm.
them, or like people made notes in the margin, or colored pictures or something. And so it's like looking at a real book.
That's very
Yeah.
cool.
Mhm.
You reminded me, I had a freelance job once where I would get scanned images of really, really old books. And my job was to kind of go through and summarize what they were saying. And it would be like, just like a brief paragraph so that would be entered into a catalog. Um, but I would find exactly what you're talking about. These little scrawls, notes that people had left to themselves, strange little pictures. You weren't quite sure what they meant. It was quite intriguing.
Yeah, I know that. I love that with archive.org, that you get to find those things, and that they do it that way. Um, yeah, I mean, you like little drawings, doodles, and it just makes it seem so real. And sometimes I'll just go to archive.org and like look for old books that I remember from my childhood,
Oh,
or,
wow.
and they have a lot of old books. They don't
Yep.
have newer books, but they have older books.
What
But
was
for
a
some
book?
topics, it doesn't matter.
What was a book that was meaningful to you from your childhood?
Oh gosh, let me think. I really liked, well, I wrote down some of my favorite authors, and I'm with the crowd. I really loved Judy Blume books when I was a kid. I read all of her books, And I loved Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And the movie was really good too. If you haven't seen the movie yet, you should see the movie. It's really good. Somebody else loves
Yeah,
archive.org.
another fan. Melissa, what about you? What was a meaningful book from your childhood?
Oh my goodness. It was Madeleine L'Engle, the woman who wrote A Wrinkle in Time, but it wasn't that book. It was one of her YA novels called A Ring of Endless Light. And it
Oh,
had,
Great title.
it was about dolphins and telepathy and death and poetry. It was fantastic.
Sounds great.
I like
Did you read
Madeline
that one
L'Engle
too?
I think I read that one too. I liked Madeline L'Engle. Yeah.
Yeah,
For sure.
I read A Wrinkle in Time, of course, but I'm not sure if I read anything else by her. One of my big childhood books was Delaire's Greek Myths. Do you know that?
Oh, it's just the Book of Myths.
It's just a book of a retelling of the Greek myths, gorgeously illustrated. The Delaires were a husband and wife team, and they also did Norse mythology. They did a book on trolls. These books are back in print now. They're just incredible. So highly recommended. Anyway, and that was a book that as I grew older and started becoming a writer, I realized had a profound effect on my wanting to be a writer and the kind of writing that I do. And I'm sure that true to some extent for your childhood books as well.
Yeah.
So the other thing, or one other thing I wanted to ask you about, in your bio, you talk about your newest work, which is called, let's see, it's called The Origin of Blair Millerstowe, and you mention that it is, or you describe it as a literary hybrid. So what does that mean? What's a literary hybrid? And tell us about this book or this hybrid production.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think I've been torn for a long time about literary versus commercial fiction. Okay. And especially teaching at Southern New Hampshire because we have a lot of genre writers. And I've come to appreciate the forms of genre forms a lot more through teaching at Southern New Hampshire. But a literary hybrid in my case, what I'm doing is I'm using a commercial voice in the book. But it has strong literary metaphors, if that makes sense. So you will take away a deep lesson from the book, but reading the book is more like reading a commercial novel. Okay, hope that makes sense.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, when you say the metaphor aspect of it, you mean you like the metaphors in the novel are more literary somehow than they are genre? And what would that look like?
Well, probably more subtle.
Okay.
Yeah, more subtle and maybe a little bit more, I hate to say that this way, intellectual.
Yep. So that's so interesting. So it's like you're working on two different levels simultaneously in writing this novel.
Yeah, I would definitely say it was like that. Right. Yeah, and I mean, because I was definitely more in my MFA program, it was strongly a literary program.
Yep.
And so I didn't write anything commercial. I wasn't writing commercial fiction for a long time. But then I started to realize that there are some advantages to writing in a more commercial style. And it was actually more suited for me because that's what I always liked to read when I was growing up. I just read what everybody else was reading. I read Judy Blume. I read, what was on the shelf. And so, but I still struggled with, with that, between literary and commercial because short stories tend to be more literary, at least the ones that I've written and the ones, that I've published. So in the novels that I've written, Dream Junkies and LUSH are more literary, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, LUSH is a sci-fi literary novel, but I wanted to write something that was more commercial. And so the entire book, it's about a woman who she lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and she's a young woman, and she's searching for her biological mother. But she was abandoned in front of a police station as an infant. So like nobody knows anything about her. Like she was just abandoned. There's no records or anything. So she has very little to go on. So there's also in this book kind of like a little bit of a crime angle, because her father is the chief of police, and Blair herself is a huge fan of true crime. So one of the things that she does in the novel is kind of, she wants to figure out, what is it about true crime that is so fascinating to her? Because I have that question about myself, and I'm sure there's people here tonight who like true crime. And do you sometimes feel bad about liking it? I mean, yes, Samantha, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's a Saturday Night Live skit about this. It's called like Murder Shows or something. Like you're enjoying you're being entertained by somebody else's, horrible experiences. So this is one of the things that Blair explores in herself throughout the book, is why does she like true crime so much?
And then I'm assuming that the commercial angle is that a true crime.
Well, yeah. Well, at the same time,
intrudes on
she's
her
trying
life.
to solve her own story, which in some ways is a crime story.
Right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. And so are you shopping that around now?
I started to, and now I think I might just like revise it a little.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still, but the ideas I have for revision are more like structural, like moving some stuff around, and
Yep.
of course probably do some rewriting. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the process for a lot of novels, at least mine. It goes kind of slow for me, where, I think I'm done and I start shopping it around, and then I'm like, maybe I'm not done yet.
Mm.
And and it doesn't take that many rejections from agents or editors for me to decide that I'm not done yet. And then I go back and I work on it more, and then eventually I get to a place where it's ready to go.
Yep. So at this point, when you finish a novel, you should probably think to yourself, you know what, I need to just let it sit for a little bit, because it's probably
Yeah.
not done, even if I think it is.
Right. And somebody just asked, how do you know when you're done? I
Yeah.
wish I could answer that, because I don't know.
I always have felt like, I can't remember who told me this, but the answer was like, when I start making things worse, that's when I know it's done.
Okay. Yeah. Well, also, like, when you're done, I mean, even if you get a contract for your book, you're still going to keep on working on it because they make you revise it. So it's not really done until it's printed or it's published.
And in the age of the ebook, you can always make revisions.
Right.
I mean, how often do you find, like, I get notices on my Kindle a lot that, oh, there have been changes to such and such a book. Do you want to download the most recent copy?
Oh, really?
And of course, sometimes your book just disappears from your Kindle because you don't really own the book anymore. You're just kind of renting it.
Right. Yeah. 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 I guess, I mean, that's like, I haven't self-published a novel yet. That's not to say that I wouldn't do that. But I guess that's one advantage of self-publishing, is that you can just take it down and revise it again if you want to.
Yeah, it's an interesting relationship with the text, because I've never self-published anything either, but when I have a book, when my book is finished, when it's been published, when it's on the shelf, it's done. I don't even think about it anymore. It's not in my mind. I never pick it up and look through it. I never reread it. It's just over. And I'm wondering if I would still have that same relationship if I knew that I could go back in and change something, because there's definitely things where I've thought about, a novel that I finished where I think like, if I was writing that today, I would have done it a little bit differently. I would have been better. I was very clumsy. It was, my first book or whatever, I didn't really understand how to do this particular thing. Now I could do it much better. Would I have the fortitude to resist the temptation to go in an electronic format and change it? Would it even matter one way or another? I mean, is a text something that's, you know, metaphorically speaking, set in stone forever, or is it something that that is, you know, forever changeable?
I know. I don't know if I like the idea of things being forever changeable, though.
I don't think I do either, but maybe that's just because, you know, we still have enough of the old way of thinking about books.
Yeah.
Maybe it's different now. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting though. So I wish you luck with that. I'm really fascinated by it, actually. How did you manage to keep the two levels of it distinct in your mind as you were writing it?
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the hardest thing, is to control it.
Yeah.
I think the commercial style of writing, you know, for me was hard, you know, because I keep wanting to like drift off into literary land, you know, where
Mm-hmm. And what would that mean? Give me an example of something that in a commercial book would drift off into literary land? Like how would a reader know that, oh my gosh, this book has now become a literary novel?
I don't know. I guess for me, it's everything in this more commercial voice that I'm using for Blair Millerstowe. There's a lot of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's always something happening. The camera, you know, your eye is always on something. Everything's written in a scene where things are happening. People are talking to each other.
Yeah.
Whereas a literary novel might do something like, you know, just go back into the person's childhood for an entire chapter.
Okay.
You know, where everything's a memory. Or it could even like change into third person and, you know, go into some other character's memory, or, you know, whatever. It might do something like that.
Right. And I guess in a commercial novel, pacing is I'm not going to say it's more of a concern, but it's a different kind of concern than it might be in a literary novel.
Yeah, pacing would be, I mean, pacing is kind of an issue for me at times. I feel like I go too fast. So, in this book, I tried to actually kind of slow down a little,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so that wasn't my big issue. But another issue I have is kind of, you know, dealing with cliches and things, tropes and cliches that you see in a lot of commercial fiction. Using that, you know, is hard for me because I was kind of trained not to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the other thing that's fascinating to me about this, and I don't mean to be critical or be singling you out in any way, because I feel like I come out of the exact same environment. But I definitely I've always read science fiction and always loved it. But I also was kind of I guess, you know, talking about myself, I was a snob. I was a literary snob because I felt like what I had to be writing was not that science fiction crap that I love to read so much, but rather were literary classics that I also love to read, but it engaged with in a different way. And I remember very well that when the light bulb went off for me, that was like, oh my gosh, I can write literary science fiction. I can, you know, have my cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just find it so fascinating that there are these and we talk about this like in MFA 505 and stuff. Like, what's the difference between a literary novel and a genre novel? Is there a difference?
Right. Yeah. I know when you really, I mean, there are so many examples of books that are considered literary that read just like commercial fiction, but for some reason, maybe it's the writer's background or various reasons, they're considered to be literary novels instead of commercial, you know, yeah. So, I mean, you can find examples of all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So, and I want to remind our listeners or viewers that if you have questions, please throw them into the chat.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Anne-Marie, you talked about making videos, and were those in the service of promoting your books?
Yeah. Well, I think it was a book blogger who wanted to put LUSH on her website, but she required me to make a video of it, of me talking about it.
Uh-huh.
And so I had to do that. And then I had to do a video for some other thing. And then I also made a video like for my own website. So yeah, I think like making these little videos is more of a thing now. You probably know more about it than because of like Bookstagram and Book Talk and all that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Where
I
people like
just
talk
wondered
about their
what
books.
what you think about finding your audience through video on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and social media.
Well, I should do more of it. I mean, what I think of it is that I need to do it more.
What stops you? Is it time, or is it too complicated, or do you just not like to be out there on video?
I don't really like being on video. I'm kind of getting used to it though.
Yeah.
I belong to this group. Has anybody ever heard of Cave Day? I should talk about Cave Day.
No.
Okay.
Please do.
It's called Cave Day. Okay, and it's a subscription service on the internet. And so the idea is that you join this big Zoom meeting. Okay, and so you're on camera. You have to be on camera. You can turn your photo on if you don't want it to be live. And they have a moderator, and he comes on and he's like, okay, everybody, we're going to do a short meditation, and then we're going to go into the cave for an hour. And so you go after you do your meditation, you go into the cave and you write for an hour, or you do whatever you like. If you need to do work or whatever, you do something else. Okay, so writing Blair Millerstowe was how all done in Cave Day, pretty much. Like I would just get into Cave Day, but that helped me feel more comfortable being on camera, was going to Cave Day.
So when you're in the cave, do you turn your camera off?
You can, but you're not supposed to. Like
That's
they
so
prefer you
cool.
to leave it on.
It kind of reminds me of like writing sprints that take place online,
Yeah.
except it's not a sprint. It's like it's a marathon or something.
Yeah, and you can see, I mean, one of the things that's kind of fun about it is you get to see everybody else working.
Right.
And then also they do like a little break, and you get to talk to two other people in the cave. Like they put you in little groups and you get to know each other. And there's people from all over the world, like you talk to people from Peru or Japan or, or Oklahoma, they're like everywhere. And so I wrote my entire novel, Blair Millerstowe, pretty much in Cave Day. But it helped me feel more comfortable on camera, so I'm better now.
It does seem like that is I don't want to say it's a requirement exactly, but it seems like it could become a requirement, right? Just like it's now a requirement to have a website. Whereas once it wasn't. It was like, oh, it's a cool thing if you have a website, but it's not necessary. Now we tell our students, oh, no, you absolutely need a website.
Yeah, I think it's good to have a website. Yeah, and if you just use the Wix.com, if you just use the Wix free website, it's just a little strip at the top. That's what I do. And then you don't have to pay for it,
Right.
Yeah, and back when I used to pay for my web services, my websites were always getting taken down because I wouldn't pay. I forget to pay. But now that I use Wix, I've had the same website for years.
Right, you don't have to worry about it. So another topic that I wanted to address, I know we usually have some undergrad students here in the chat, and I'm sure there are some here today who may be considering applying for the MFA, and so we just happen to have 3 of the people who are responsible for reviewing applications to the MFA and deciding, well, to put it mild, to be blunt about it, deciding that or that about the applications. And So I thought, since we're all here, and by the way, Anne-Marie and Melissa do far more of this than I do, but I pop in sometimes as well. So we thought it would be useful to answer any questions that you might have about like the application process, and also to talk a little bit about like what makes a successful application, what are the red flags that you should watch out for in working up your application. So why don't we start there? Like, what are some common, I don't want to say errors, but just common elements that you find in applications that might cause you to reject an applicant?
Okay, well, I guess I'll start. Okay, one thing is if it's not fiction. Okay, so that I know that seems sort of straightforward, but some people I had just like 2 weeks ago, somebody turned in like a really long poem for their application. Because this is all a fiction program, we don't take, poetry is not acceptable for your writing sample. So that would be a big one.
Yeah.
Like another one would be, yeah, it has to be fiction. So it has to be fiction or turning in nonfiction. And sometimes I'll get an application, it used to happen more frequently, but where you sort of can't tell if it's nonfiction or fiction. So I would say make sure that your writing sample is fiction and that it's very clear that it's fiction.
Right.
Yeah. And then another thing would be lack of control with language. So, problems with sentence structure, problems with punctuation and grammar, severe problems, not just missing a comma or something, but
right.
Severe pattern of errors that you see throughout the application.
And for example, one that occurs to me would be verb tenses that are jumping all over the place.
Yes.
That'd be a red flag.
Yeah, and point of view changes also.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you think it's better for applicants to submit something that's complete, like a complete short story, or is it okay for them to submit like an excerpt from something longer?
I think it's okay to do either. In fact, tonight I had one, it was a chapter of a novel. It was an excellent novel chapter, but it ended, with nothing resolved because it was just,
right.
One chapter, but right. I loved it. Yeah.
I mean, I guess as long as you can make a judgment on the intent and control of the writer in what they're submitting, it really shouldn't matter.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Not to me. I don't know about Melissa.
I'm amazed. I teach at a lot of different writing conferences, and a lot of them have the kind of social event at night first pages, and you can submit the first page of your novel or nonfiction piece, and then a panel of editors and agents will sort of judge it, and there's a cash prize. And I am amazed at how much I can tell about an entire piece from the first paragraph and the first page. So the applications that really catch my eye and make me say, yes, please, are those that immediately hook me with complex character and a writer who, understands how to write dialogue and punctuate it properly, so that the dialogue works in service of building characterization and relationship and moving the story forward. Also, sentence variations. So, short sentences, longer, more complex sentences, and right. A sense of setting. So what do things look like around the protagonist, and sensory details? What do things smell like and feel like and sound like, etc.? All of those conspire. And big turnoffs for me as well are errors in grammar and punctuation, and that verb tense shift is a big one. When I see that, right. I just automatically reject it, because if you can't tell the difference between present and past tense, you're not quite ready to take on the MFA program.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, a lot of the times if we reject somebody and we feel like, well, you know, this person just needs a little more work, and then they can reapply, then we'll kind of direct them over to the MA
Yep.
program, which does not require an application. You don't have to be accepted into that program and have to get a few courses under your belt there. Then you can reapply to the MFA. Hopefully, where can people learn about this stuff? I mean, I think it's true that you have to be. You don't obviously when you're turning in your application for the MFA program, we don't expect that it's going to be perfect. We don't expect that there are not going to be any spelling errors. There are not going to be any grammar mistakes. We don't expect that it's in publishable shape already. That's not realistic. But what we do expect is that it shows evidence of somebody who's writing at a level where they can go on to succeed in the MFA. Because if we let someone in who isn't equipped yet to work at that level, then we're taking their money for nothing. You know, they're not going to be able to succeed in the program, even if they have the desire to, because they're not ready.
Right.
One of
Yeah.
my favorites in the chat.
One thing that I would like to throw in because I forgot is sometimes I'll get a writing application and it kind of sounds like a children's story. Yeah, and those are kind of challenging because the writing might be okay, but it's so simplistic,
Yeah.
you know, and we don't, our program is not a children's writing program. So
that's the other thing. I mean, just like you said before about the poetry, you know, your application should be should represent one of the genres that we are covering in the MFA.
Right. Yeah.
I think I've actually admitted somebody with a memoir excerpt before, because they made clear in their personal statement or in their introduction to the excerpt that this is a piece of nonfiction, but it's written in a fictional style, and I think it demonstrates my ability, you know, to express character and dialogue. And in fact, it did do all those things. So I felt like, well, as long as this person is writing at the requisite level, as long as they understand that they can't be working on nonfiction in the program, then I didn't have any trouble accepting them.
Oh, okay.
Then if Adelia asks, does the MFA have YA? And the answer is yes.
Oh,
the
definitely.
MFA
Yeah.
does have YA. The genres that we cover are speculative, romance, contemporary, and YA. And we have courses that are dedicated to each of these genres. And our instructors like Anne-Marie and Melissa are all published novelists who have a lot of experience and knowledge and wisdom about, you know, specific genres.
Oh.
How many applicants are there compared to how many people get accepted? That is a great question, and I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I think I'm a little afraid to hazard a guess, but I'm sure we accept at least half of the people that are applying, maybe even more.
Probably,
I mean,
yeah.
generally speaking, the errors or you know, red flags that we're talking about are not present in the majority of the applications that we receive. They're present in a lot of them. Don't get me wrong; they're definitely there, but it's not like, you know, if I'm looking at 5 applications, it's not going to be like reject, 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 reject. That would be very, very unusual.
Yeah, right. Another thing, we should talk a little bit about the personal statement
Okay.
that is included with your application. One thing that I would say don't do, it's just probably not a good idea in your personal statement. Sometimes I'll get somebody who will say something like, or they'll put it on the top of their writing sample. They'll say, this is the only thing I've ever written.
Yeah.
Like the only piece of fiction. This is the
Yeah,
only fiction I've ever written.
We don't
And
need to know
it's
that.
probably not a good idea to mention that.
Right.
Just don't say that.
Well, and you know, the other thing is like with a personal statement, like a lot of times I'll read a personal statement that's like, you know, I never like to read until I read Harry Potter,
Harry
just as an
Potter.
example. And ever since then I've been on fire to write, a YA fantasy novel, which is perfectly fine, right? But if you're I think your personal statement should have more than that. Because if you're referencing like a global phenomenon in writing that probably almost everybody of a certain age has read or knows about, I think you need to add something more that sets you apart, that really indicates that you're not a one-trick pony, so to speak, that your interests in literature and writing go beyond Harry Potter, that maybe
Right.
that stoked the fire or it stoked your interest. But since then, you've also read X, Y, or Z, and you've noticed this and that or whatever, and you've decided that you want to expand your horizons or just deepen your mastery of your craft. Those are the things I think are meaningful in a personal statement.
I agree 100%. I'm surprised how many applications say that they're inspired to get an MFA because of reading Harry Potter.
Oh, yes. Oh,
yeah, I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And again, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, I'm grateful for Harry Potter, maybe not so much for J.K. Rowling,
Right.
the 2024 edition, but yeah.
I really like the personal statements to talk about like a personal experience from childhood. Like I had a teacher who took me aside and told me, I should keep on writing, or something about my grandmother always, read me folk tales from Russia, or, just some interesting personal story.
Right.
I like, or a personal struggle, like having dyslexia and overcoming it, things like that.
Yeah. But at the same time, I don't want, it would be very unusual for somebody to be rejected. In fact, it's not possible for somebody to be rejected on the basis of a personal statement alone, unless they neglect to supply one. Because it's part of the required application package. But you're not going to be rejected for whatever you put in there. You're going to be rejected or accepted on the strength of what you submit as a work of fiction.
Right. Yeah. Your writing sample is more important, but I like to read the personal statements. It's just,
oh, absolutely.
I think the personal statement gives you a sense of the person. And then also it's kind of a lot like maybe a discussion board post that you would have in a class. So you kind of, as an evaluator, you kind of get to see how this person would be on a discussion board, like how would they actually be as a student in the program.
Yep. And the other thing I will say is, like I mentioned earlier, that we don't expect your fiction submission to be, in perfect shape. But but it would not hurt if your personal statement was in perfect shape. That's a relatively short piece of writing, and there's no reason for that to be, riddled with errors of grammar or spelling or anything else. That's something you should take time over.
Absolutely.
Is it true you do not require references for the fully online MFA? That is in fact correct. At least as far as I know, that we don't require references. You're admitted solely on the basis of your application materials. We've got about 5 minutes or so left, and so I'm going to call for any more questions that anybody might have about the application process to the MFA. We encourage everyone to apply. I mean, I wish we had, more students. Our program is growing. Every term the number of students goes up, but we want more. We're hungry. But I think we have a great program, and I think we're genuinely offering something of value to writers of genre work.
I think so. If I had the kind of structure in my MFA program that we offer our students, I think I would have been a better writer coming out of my MFA.
Dow wonders how many of us are there. And again, I don't have the exact number, but I believe we're in the high 600s now.
Thanks, Kristen.
For those graduating in a year, when should we apply to the MFA? Well, you can apply at any time, really, within a year, because if you're accepted into the MFA, that acceptance lasts for a year. Do we need to have a story going prior to starting the MFA? And the answer is no, you do not. The MFA is the requirement for graduation, or one of the requirements for graduation in the MFA, is completing a novel of at least 50,000 words. And revising it, not just completing it, but revising it. So some students come into the program with a novel in mind. Some have already been working on the novel, and others have absolutely no idea what their thesis novel will be until later in the program. Either of those things are fine.
I think it's great that the students work on novels in the MFA program. So many MFA programs have you write short stories because short stories are suited for classes, but in the end, most people want to write novels, and that's where you're really going to get somewhere as a creative writer. And that the students get to work on novels in our program, I think makes our program stand out in a special way.
Ooh, so many questions. I almost answered one in the chat to save time, and then I realized I didn't know the answer. How soon do we say yes or no to an application?
We say it pretty quick. I mean, I think what we're aiming for, and correct me if I'm wrong, Anne Marie, aren't we saying we give an answer back in like 48 hours or something like that?
Yeah, and Melissa and I and Courtney and you, like, we're supposed to do it within 48 hours, but I'm not sure what happens after that, like when the student would actually receive their.
That's a good question, and I don't really know the answer to that. And sometimes it can be a little delayed as well, either for technical reasons. Sometimes the system is down, or sometimes we won't have enough information, and we'll ask the person in charge of the applications to go back and try to get us more information before we make a decision on a particular application. So here's a question. Other than honing our creative writing skills, what other personal professional benefits does the program offer upon graduating? So that's a great question. I'll try to answer it quickly. So first of all, the MFA is a terminal degree, which means that it's the highest degree that you can earn in its field. There's no, I mean, yes, they do offer PhDs now in the MFA, but those are not, but the MFA it's still considered the terminal degree. So that means with a terminal degree, you can teach creative writing at the university or college level. So there's that qualification. Honestly, if you're sending a query letter to an agent, if you say that I'm a graduate from the such and such MFA program, that will make a difference. It's not going to close the sale or anything like that, but it will cause the agent to put you in the, oh, let's look at this more closely pile. Secondly, the MFA is not just about, our MFA is not just about, how to improve your writing craft. It's also about how to succeed in the business of writing, how to learn about freelance writing careers, what you need to know about self-publishing and traditional publishing from a writer's standpoint, how you can turn editing into a freelance sideline that will help you earn money to supplement your writing. So really, our program has two tracks. One of them is a business track, and one of them is the writing track. And of course, they're intertwined and reinforce each other. So Steve says it took about a week in total to hear back from admissions. So that's good. I guess if there's a weekend in there, that makes a difference too. And that's going to be it, I guess. Yes, and as Dow says, making lifelong connections for your writing career.
Oh, yeah.
And Star, I'm very happy that you're going to apply, and I'm going to throw my email in. As the dean of the program, I'm always very happy to answer any questions anyone might have. So there's my email address if anybody has questions that would like to ask me. Anne Marie, thank you so much for.
Thanks. And before I go, I just want to say to any of my students who are out in the audience who said hi and the little notification, hi back, hi all of my former students that are here. Thank you. I wish I could talk to you more. Bye.
Thank you, and you, and you, and you, and you. And
Yeah.
you. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so
Thank
much,
you,
Melissa.
everybody. Thanks,
Okay,
Anne-Marie.
bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.